You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello. It is Alex here, and it is also day 22 of our 28-day Flowing with Your Cycle series. Thank you so much for joining me. Can't believe we are this far already. That is super cool. I'm glad that you are here. So, day 22. What are we talking about today? We're going to talk about balance, because that is really the name of the game in phase 4. And there's going to be some interesting questions and opportunities in this phase of your cycle that really allows for some major transformation of not only what you actually do and experience in your life, but just the experience of yourself in general, which, as you've noticed, has been the name of the game kind of the whole time. So this is a biggie, but it's also super fun because we get to do life in a way that feels easier. And doesn't that sound nice, especially after the couple of years we've had? So before I dig into that, I want to make sure that you are joining us for our Ultimate Hormone Health Blueprint series, totally free 3-part series, and it culminates in a 4th part, which is a live 90-minute training. We're going to be teaching, we're going to be doing freebies, we're going to be doing giveaways, all sorts of stuff that you won't want to miss out on. So go either to the show notes and click the link there, or if you go to zestyginger.com/hormone blueprint, it's going to be right there to sign up. And yes, you can join anytime after we start, though September 7th is when the first video goes out. So make sure you catch that. And then that's it for announcements. Let's get back to balance. All right, so balance, where are we at here? So in phase 4, like we talked about yesterday, we're starting to make the transition to looking at what it looks like to merge our life with what we already have going on and what we are setting in this cycle, right? What's the newness, and how does that actually translate into the pre-existing structure of our life? So this becomes very apparent when you start to bring all of you together in wholeness and approach your life from that bigger perspective of who you are, what you are about, instead of kind of chunking up who you are as a mother, as an employee, as a boss, as a partner, whatever it is that you got, your health. A lot of times it's the disconnect of all these different parts being on different pages that makes it difficult to find balance, right? Because you're like, well, balance can be very different based off which part of my life I'm focusing on. And that's definitely true. But what we're going to talk about today actually is balance from the standpoint of, how do you view that in general? Like, as an actual whole, it's important to look at what does the concept of balance in your life look like for you? Because here's the deal. Different things, just like in all other scenarios, will work for different people. And you've probably heard differing viewpoints on this, right? Like, there's no such thing as balance. Sometimes I devote more time to this. Sometimes I devote more time to that. There's just different seasons of my life. Sometimes it's, all right, I would like to have, these 3-4 things, which are my top values and represent the things I am most devoted to in my life. I will always find a balance between them. Everything else will come inside, the spaces that are left between those, right? And so for us, it's really less about looking at what someone else's idea of balance is and really beginning to utilize the time and space and the inward focus of phase 4 to do some of that evaluation for yourself. And what's cool about doing it cycle after cycle is that over time we begin to really notice our own patterns depending on what's going on in our life, right? It's the experiential knowledge that we gain of, oh, this happened this way, this is how I responded conscientiously, not knee-jerk reaction, but I really thought about it. This season of my life, this is how this phase went, this is what balance represented. Again, it comes back to building that toolkit of we're not static, so which success strategy is going to work for us at different times. And part of that is going through the differences of the cycles, noting them, and really garnering those little nuggets of information that will serve us going forward in the future. So that is why this balance discussion is not so much my thoughts on what balance looks like in life, but it is beginning to uncover what your beliefs are around balance. So one of the main things that happens here, it tends to be that someone gets clear on the goal. By someone, I mean I've totally done this, but you may be here, you've set your sights on where you want to go, you're starting to take high leverage action, you're creating follow through to set yourself up for success. And then things start to get a little rocky. A lot of times it's along with our cycle, and then sometimes there's other things that come onto our path and impact us and all of that. And it's what happens when things are not looking so perfect that we discover what our opinions and our beliefs are about balance and what it looks like, right? Because if you are similar to a lot of people, that if you set that goal and then, let's say, eating more healthfully, whatever that means for you, and you get to phase 4, you start to have cravings, or things come up, or you're hungrier than what you have arbitrarily set in your mind to be an acceptable amount of food, or if you're still counting calories and things like that. What happens then is that often, because we can't sustain this perfection, which is a standard we placed onto ourselves that supersedes the idea of balance, it's more important in our belief structure to attempt to be perfect than it is to really show up in balance. Though if you ask most people what they think, they would tell you it's flipped. But the way most people behave is that what we actually want is the perfection, and we kind of just soothe ourselves with the idea of balance, right? So then you fall off the wagon and the whole thing comes crashing down, plus the impact that that has on your self-esteem then, if that's really where you've hung your hat on, right? And so balance becomes a really key thing to truly think about what it represents to you in different scenarios and different parts of your life, and different seasons of what is happening to you, right? And at first, a lot of people try to go to, well, how many brownies can I have for me to still have balance? And you are absolutely going to make decisions from wherever you are, but as we've talked about before, oftentimes mucking around in the details of the action you're going to take doesn't really get at the kind of values, decision making points, what you make most important for the rest of the time, right? And that's where a lot of people feel disconnected, and that's why they feel bad about themselves, is because they're not really in alignment to what's important to them, right? Therefore, when we talk about balance then today, it really comes down to, let's start with the goal you already have for this cycle. What is it that you had implemented and that you have set your sights on? When we really sit down and think about that, whether we are journaling or talking through it with someone or just taking a walk and thinking about things on our own, what is the interplay for you around the expectation that you have around perfection? Like, what are your expectations for yourself actually? And a lot of us, when we think about it, it really is kind of perfection. We expect ourselves to be robots and to sustain something the whole time. This is not necessarily the time that you need to figure out how you're going to fix this. This is simply an assessment of what really are your unspoken expectations for yourself around this. And you will likely fall out, within a spectrum of everyone else. Some of us are super hard on ourselves. We expect it to be, every single day the same thing. You feel the same way. You don't have to think about it. That is just, who you are now. And all the way over to, yeah, I kind of have, expectations for myself, but I really allow myself to flow and ebb. Wherever you are is totally fine. But often, unless we are really living that balance and not having the on the wagon, off the wagon experience, there's more to uncover there. So that's number one. It's just really beginning to ask, what is the standard that I am setting in my own mind? From there, you can start to really parse out, where are the times that when things come up, how is real life coming at a cross to the expectations that you have, right? Because if the expectation is, I'm going to eat perfectly clean, and you have one cookie a month, right, there's the opportunity to go, oh no, I messed up. Or you have the cookie, you're like, oh my gosh, I messed up, I'm going to have the whole sleeve of Oreos, right? And then you really begin to add all the guilt and shame on. Or, really beginning to see, okay, if I'm actually okay with that, then shifting my expectations so that I account for this kind of thing happening. And that is now not just an expectation that floats around in your head, and when it's not clear, it can cause a lot of problems because it's there, but we may not be aware of it enough to have it guide our decisions. But now that we brought that up, the decision making around what are we actually doing becomes much, much more straightforward, because it's the same as when you're at a job and you have a boss that doesn't really explain what they want. Like, they're nice, right? They're like friendly to talk to. You don't know what they actually think that they want you to do, right? That is very off kilter. So most people in that scenario know, I like them, they're nice, but I do not enjoy this job. And that's exactly what we end up setting up for ourselves when we are not very clear on what would balance look like. What does allowment of lifing to look like in this scenario? And oftentimes that really helps us see the common threads of the expectations that we hold around ourselves and for ourselves, and therefore impacts what our understanding of balance looks like, right? Because again, there are times where we can talk a big game, like, yeah, I believe in balance, I'll eat healthy, but when you're, at the end of the Oreo sleeve and you realized in that moment you went farther than you wanted to, what happens then? Right? That's when balance becomes important, because it's not only the balance towards the way we want to go, but balance the other way, that we begin to see that range. It's all just shades of color. And now with the understanding of what balance means to you, the discussion changes. Okay, so I did that, what's next? Not, oh my gosh, I missed the mark, tear down the whole barn and burn it, right? As we often tend to do. So whether or not, things happen during this phase, it's worth doing this kind of thinking today, to really begin to get very clear on when that happens. Because here's the thing, it will. We live lives that are constantly evolving, which means the goalposts are always moving. That means that even if we decide something today, things can shift in a little while. We have to reassess it again. And it's these systems of asking ourselves questions at the time that we are ready and primed for them, that then really give us that knowledge of, this is how I interact with myself at each time to figure that out, and not something that we kind of perpetually rail against and say, I want to be different, but I'm not. And even though you're evolving, and probably when you look back in your life, you're evolving in the direction you want to go still, but unless you enjoyed the process of getting there, it doesn't feel that good. We don't turn around and say, that was super fun. We turn around and we're like, oh, hey, that turned out better than I thought. But the only reason we were thinking it was bad was because of the kind of conversations, the kind of, or really the lack of awareness around what we want for ourselves and what we expect about ourselves. That makes it much less fun in the process. And so we shouldn't have to wait to turn around and go, oh yeah, I did get better over the last 5 years in the ways that I wanted to. What if it was happening in real time and we could see that appreciation even when we make choices in the moment that maybe are not super in line with us? But that is why the balance discussion really smooths out that whole thing. You did it. Okay, so you leaned in one direction. Do you even have evidence the rest of the month that you were very much going in the opposite way, right? You were going the way you wanted to. Now you just took a step back. What is a step back and a step forward? And that whole dance thing, right? People, there's that quote of like, it's not a step forward, a step back, it's just called a cha-cha. But same thing here, right? When you zoom out like this, do you believe that part of balance is doing that, and that being okay? And if it's not okay, what does it look like for you? And the last thing I want to leave you with is that if you would not love to see a friend setting something up for themselves like this, right? Whether they're being really hard on themselves or really strict, or their expectations you feel like unreasonable, if you really are close to this person and you care about them, you would likely kind of float it out to them, hey, I really see you being hard on yourself. This is the opportunity now, as we move inwards, to also be our own best parent, right? We can have lots of complaints about our parents, lots of things that can happen, or caregivers in general. And when we reach adulthood, we get to pick what it looks like to parent ourselves. So if you, and especially if you're hard on yourselves, you may not have had caregivers that were able to express that to you. So you don't have to be another version of what you already don't like about the caregivers, right? You get to be the perfect parent for you, as perfect, obviously, as we can imagine anything being here. But, do the little assessment, right? Do the friend test. Would you say, yeah, I support that, I love that, I think that you're really treating yourself with kindness and respect, and this whole balance discussion. If you look at your stuff and you wouldn't say that to a friend, it's time to go back to the drawing board. What does real, authentic balance, giving yourself the permission to be, imperfect, whatever perfect means, imperfect and adaptive to what you need and what's going on and what's happening in your life as possible? This is one of the more freeing aspects of phase 4, right? We may be dealing with not feeling great in our bodies, and that can have a lot of beliefs around it that, cycle by cycle we can begin to up level, and still things just get easier before they even change when we approach ourselves with this, like, hey, I'm not going to expect perfection. What does this look like? What does balance look like? Let's figure out how to cut myself some slack. Where are the allowances? What makes this fun, right? The whole concept is still for enjoyment. It's not just slave your way and be miserable until you, quote, get to your goals and that'll be fun, because I think we all know that that's not how it works. Right? You don't just magically get to the end and poof, there you are, that person. You become that person over time. And so likely the person that you envision yourself as, you're healed, you're peaceful, you're calm, you're content, you're passionate, you're happy, you're creative. You can become those aspects now and find that enjoyment and balance in your life without needing all of the puzzle pieces to be set in place until you give yourself the permission to find any sort of enjoyment in it. So this is your invitation to, that you don't hear this a lot from health people, but like, yeah, eat the cookie, right? If that's what you need, or whatever your metaphorical cookie is, where's the balance? Where's the fun? Where's the allowance? Ask yourself those, and you'll be amazed at how freeing that feels. Holy cow. And you can look around and be like, I actually didn't have to change that much. All I did was think differently, and my life is more fun now. Once we draw that comparison, things get really, really fun, because then you no longer, have to be in misery until you get the thing to be happy. In which case, once you get the thing, you want the next thing, right? So then we're just chronically keeping ourselves from not enjoying it. So the balance and having this whole kind of clarity around this issue or the situation, really, really helpful. All right, sending you lots of love. Have fun doing this work. I'm rooting for you. And don't forget to love on yourself as well. Alrighty, I will talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these pod classes helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.